Welcome to the Proving Grounds. I'm Andrew, and today we're going to discuss this COVID-19 debacle. Now, as most of you know, COVID-19 is the coronavirus that came out of the Wuhan province in China, and the Chinese government hid all knowledge of this disease from November of last year till January of first year. I should say the Chinese government now admits that it knew about this as early as November, if you can trust the word on this at all, since the only reason why they disclosed information of the disease was because one of their own doctors started leaking the information to the media. Imagine that. Then what does the United States media do? Well, they take this incredibly important story, instead of just reporting on it, letting people take in the facts, internalize it, try to deal with this rationally. They say, no, that won't generate enough views, and turn this into a media firestorm, sensationalism, and hysteria. And then what does the government do? Well, through its usual ineptitude and pure negligence, it threw gasoline right on this dumpster fire of a crisis. And I'm not really going to talk about all the technical stuff like that, just for brevity's sake. What I want to get to is how terrible I think the government response has been on every level. Because the government created a shortage of all the supplies through regulation. It created a shortage of testing in the beginning through the CDC creating crappy tests, and then bad regulations prevented people from getting the tests necessary to disseminate and test people, so no one really knew who had it. No one really knew who had it before and had antibodies for it, any of that. It's all the fault of the government. And then because of the way the media was acting, like they always do in times like this, right? They're screaming like they expect people to be running around, exploding in the street, just spontaneously combusting. Like, we all just turned into vampires and it's noon outside. They expect everyone just to start dying left and right. Talking about how millions of people are going to die just in the U.S. alone. I mean, the media, it's terrible what they did. But I digress. So the government, right? Take New York State government, for instance. At first, seemed like they might have a semi-reasonable approach. They put out social distancing guidelines. They said, hey, we don't want anyone who could get sick and die to get sick and die. So try to stay home if you can. If you're sick, stay home. Wash your hands. Your basic flu season stuff, really. Right? And then President Trump points the stink finger right at Governor Cuomo and says, you're not doing enough. People are dying. Basically blames Cuomo. Cuomo looks, what does he do? And this is the scariest part. Okay, a lot of these politicians, Cuomo's not the only one. They look to China, the authoritarian communist regime that has no problem destroying the rights of their citizens. Okay? They not even get fully started on that either. It's horrible. They look to them as a guiding light for all of this. I mean, what does Cuomo do? He turns around and hits everyone with an iron fist of oppression. And he goes from suggesting things to immediately, tomorrow, 50% of employees are going to be gone. Boom. And then 2 days later, 25% of employees only can remain. Boom. And a couple days later, all businesses we've deemed non-essential, boom, done, shut down. Right? You can't get a haircut. Can't go out and buy new shoes. Whatever, right? At least I can still get that bottle of Jack and a cheeseburger from McDonald's. I mean, completely unthinking, across the board, hits everyone with the same thing, boom. Right? Completely ignores the effect this is going to have on the economy. Completely ignores the effect this is going to have on people's state of mind. So they don't care that it's going to hurt you mentally, it's hurting you physically, it's even hurting you spiritually. No thought about the total cost of what this kind of action, and especially prolonged action, could be to a human being, just an individual, let alone the entirety of all of society. Okay, Cuomo said, I'm the philosopher king. I know what's best. You don't have enough of the information. You're not smart enough. You're not wise enough to use the information even if you had it. And you're certainly not mature enough to be trusted. So I'm going to make all of your decisions for you from here on out for as long as I see fit. Period. And I think you should have a major problem with that, because I sure do. And it's not just an ego thing. Someone's telling me what to do and I don't like it. It's the fact that he does not know what I need to live my daily life, to live my best life. Okay? I know what I need to do all that. I know what my passions are, what my values are, what my goals are in life. Only I know those things. He can't possibly know, because for starters, he didn't even ask me. Now, I'm not a completely irrational human being. I already knew I probably wasn't going to be going to a lot of concerts and football games and baseball and basketball games and stuff surrounded by thousands of people. Okay? In no way have I been an alarmist about this situation, but, you know, I also have a half a brain in my head. I wouldn't go visit my mother in a nursing, or my grandmother in a nursing home knowing I could get her sick, right? Didn't really need to be told by mandate. Meanwhile, while they were doing this, before they did this to everybody, in February, you know, guidelines could have been put out to hospitals. Do not allow anybody who isn't, you know, that doesn't need to be here to come visit. No visitors to hospitals, anything state run. No visitors to nursing homes. All that. No, the people most at risk were left at risk until everyone got hit with that same fucking ban hammer. Boom. And the reason I'm so mad about it is because, again, he just doesn't care. Only thing you hear about is nothing. There's no cost too great to prevent one person from dying. It's asinine. He's saying, I'm sacrificing all of you on the altar of what's good for what I'm calling the greater good. And then, on the other hand, sometimes they also switch that up with that utilitarian view. I'm just trying to do the best for the most amount of people. It's not the government's job to stop the economy, and they did. Right? Yet, I hear nothing from Governor Cuomo or any of these other politicians, no one from the Senate, the House of Representatives, anything about getting rid of these regulations that caused the problem. All I've been hearing from any of them is, we need more money. More money needs to get put out. New York needs more money. We need to put out a emergency spending bill, or I'm not sure, stimulus package, because they keep calling it both. And it's funny how one politician calls it an emergency spending bill, another one calls it a stimulus bill, and then they all kind of pretend like it is both. Because if you're going to call it a stimulus bill, you can't crush the economy and then do a stimulus bill, because it shows that you have either have no real plan, or you don't understand what are you going to stimulate. You shut everything down. You can't stimulate what are we going to buy right now. What are people going to buy? They're limited on what they can buy. I mean, here's more dishonesty that comes from the government, right? So then you got all these politicians and people in the media pointing at companies, at entrepreneurs, at capitalism itself, and attacking capitalism, saying, look, capitalism can't provide the things we need. Look at this emergency situation. We can't get the goods we need right now. Because these evil companies, these evil entrepreneurs, these evil businessmen have companies, or I should say, facilities all over the world. They're not producing the goods here where we don't have the biggest problem. They had these things in China, so we couldn't get all the stuff from China at first. There's facilities in the Philippines that never got reopened after their last natural disaster. It's all capitalism's fault. Well, for starters, we don't have a capitalist economy. It's a mixed economy, and it's been heavily skewed to the socialist, if you want to call it the entitlement side, for a long time. The more the government gets involved and interjects socialism into the economy, the worse everything's been getting. I mean, the government, every level. There was a company, 3M, sitting on masks because they were rated industrial masks. N95 masks do the exact same thing that medical masks do, except they don't have the medical designation, and because they don't have the medical designation, they're not approved by the FDA, which would leave them liable to horrible lawsuits later on down the line. You can't expect a company to bankrupt itself, okay? You can't expect, I'm hearing this all the time, well, if more companies there would be a vaccine right now. There should be a vaccine right this second. That takes time. And some of these companies are doing their damnedest to produce something now, and they're not charging an arm and a leg for it. They're doing what they can do. These evil capitalists are doing everything they can do to help everybody. But what would have cost a lot more, or I should say a lot less, than $2 trillion bill? Maybe offering to pay more money for ventilators and for masks. The federal government wants to spend all this money. Why didn't they just say, hey, we'll pay double for an N95 mask? Whoever can produce these masks properly, produce them now. Who wants to retool? You don't have to force GM to do something they were already going to do. But hey, New York State, they want your help unless you happen to be a gun manufacturer offering to help. Because that happened. Gun manufacturer offered to retool some of their services and they were told no. Right? Heaven forbid a company from the gun industry help out at a time like this. I'm glad to see human life never gets in the way of a politician. They're playing their political games. So just remember that at every level, the government has dropped the ball. And the response to this at every turn has been completely unthinking, completely short range. They're not even looking 3 months down the road from now, 6 months down the road. And it's scary because a couple politicians that are looking a little bit down the road, they're like, yeah, we'll just start the economy back up in June and it'll be great until September when we shut it down again because of coronavirus. Okay, if you think it's here to stay, then we have to figure out how to deal with it in a rational way, okay, so people can go back to work, make money, pursue their values and their purpose in life. You can't take away someone's purpose in life and then be surprised later on when people are getting sicker, mentally sick. They're, losing, being physically harmed by being forced to stay indoors, not really being able to do the things that they love to do. And it's not just about working out, about being able to be outside and interact with other human beings and things of that nature. Never mind the number of people who probably, what about all the people who live in places like New York City, who have their grandparents living at home, or they have older parents, now their kids are home from school all the time. So people are getting sick who might not ever would have got sick because they're being forced to stay at home and cough all over each other. So just think about that for a minute. Okay, let that sink in. The government really didn't have a plan. Everything they did was just completely knee-jerk reaction, completely unthinking. And the things they did, I think, were completely over the top. Now, I'm not saying the government doesn't have a proper role to play. It certainly does. It obviously has a role to play in figuring out how, since trying to determine that threshold from if you have the flu, you walk around and you cough, and someone gets sick, you don't go to jail, to what the standard is where now you've actually, by being sick with something like coronavirus, what that minimum standard is so that, the government can articulate, well, because you walked around sick, you've actually used force on these other people who became sick because of you. You physically infected them. You knowingly infected people because you knew you had this, hypothetically, if you can prove it, and you walked around with it like a jackass. You know, these are things that should be seriously discussed, and it should be discussed not just with, you know, some guys like Dr. Fauci who want to maintain a position in the government, you know, who has information. They're talking about that they have information. They're not discussing exactly where they got the information from or what their information exactly is. And again, also being on the extreme negative side on potential harmful effects. I personally think that most people can be trusted, just be given the information, think about it, and make up their own minds on whether or not they should be traveling about right now, for the most part. That being said, if an 85-year-old, we'll say of sound mind you, decides that they don't care, they're going to live their lives anyway, because who knows how many months or years they have to live, they're not going to live their life in fear, wants to go out and do their own thing and risk it themselves, that's on them. Okay, who are you to tell someone they can't go live their life? You're going to tell that same 85-year-old that it should be illegal for them to go skiing? Or how much, by law, how much alcohol they should consume? Or, hey, why not? We tell them they can't have sex either because you're not healthy enough. By law, you're not allowed to have sex. Think about it. Sounds asinine, but I mean, really. The government can tell you you can't even leave your own home and go to work today. What can't they tell you? If you own a business and they can tell you you can't run your business today because we decided it's unhealthy for somebody, what can't they tell you to do with your own property? Now I'm just going to give you guys a little heads up. It's been a minute since I've produced one of these videos, and I just want to let everybody know that I appreciate you watching my videos in the past, and hopefully you will do all that. Click like, share, and subscribe on this video. I really hope you share the piss out of it, and just know that I will have more videos coming out, hopefully like 3 in a week. I want to try to do 3 a week if I can, and I've actually got a lot of content that I've been working on that I'm going to start putting out soon. So I really appreciate anyone who's been supporting me, and be safe.